Everything was great when my husband and I first moved into our new apartment in Fresno, California. We had just moved out of his parents' home, and it was finally the real deal. Living on your own, paying your own rent, buying your own food, and so on. I've always been the very independent type, so it was exciting to get that kind of freedom back. Anyways, our apartment was small. The door opened to a small square-shaped living room with a huge ocean view window. To the right was the kitchen with a small dining area. Once you entered the living room, straight ahead of you was a short hallway that led to the bathroom and bedroom. It was a one-bedroom apartment. The whole apartment's flooring was a pale wood except for the bathroom and kitchen, which had a floral tile. The window panes were painted red. The apartment was small but cozy, a good place to start off our life. Plus, I liked how the apartment was a little further away from the usual busy areas of Fresno. When we first moved in, my father-in-law came and did a cleansing in the apartment because he's a very traditional Hmong man. Not saying that I'm not. In fact, I'm also very traditional, but I didn't think much of it because the apartments were pretty newly built, about 2 to 3 years old. After my father-in-law left, my husband and I spent a couple of hours digging through our boxes. But once I grew tired of it, not knowing where to put things, I told my husband to take me to the store to get some furniture to put things on. We left and went to the store for a good 4 to 5 hours. It was dark by the time we got back, so we showered and immediately went to bed. The next morning, my husband left early for work, so I decided to move some of the boxes into the kitchen and dining area. That way, when the delivery guys arrived, I could have them set up whatever we needed. As I moved the boxes around, I kept noticing long strands of hair on the ground and some on the boxes. It wasn't enough to be noticed right away, but as I moved more boxes, I realized it was pretty much spread throughout. I knew for sure it wasn't mine because I had a short A-line cut during that time and my husband had a clean cut. I didn't give it much thought because my sister-in-laws were helping us pack when we were moving out, and they both had pretty long black hair, so I thought it might have been theirs. Since we left the window open last night, the wind might have blown the hair everywhere. After I finished moving the boxes and swept the floor, I went into the bedroom to put away our blankets to make room for the bed when it arrived. As I was folding the blankets, I noticed long strands of hair around the bedroom, mostly around the corners of where we slept last night. Honestly, I was a little freaked out, but decided to brush it off and quickly swept the room. Later that night, when my husband came home, I brought up the subject to him. He just shrugged it off and also suggested that it might have been his sister's, which somehow comforted me a little. I just left it as it is and left for work since I worked night shifts. A couple of days later, I got up around noon when my husband had already gone to work. I decided to finish unpacking and maybe go out to do a little bit of grocery shopping. While I was cleaning and unpacking, I noticed strands of long hair laying around the floor and furniture. This time there seemed to be more. I quickly checked the bedroom and noticed the hair inside the bedroom again. Then I slowly checked around the corners of the hallway and kitchen, but didn't notice any more hair other than 1 or 2. Finally, I went into the bathroom, but there was only evidence of our own short hair. I even checked the bed and pillow for hair because if our hair is falling out that much, filling the living room and bedroom, I figured most of it should be on the pillow or in the bathroom. But once again, I only found evidence of our short hair. It was only a strand or 2. I tried not to think too much about it and quickly finished cleaning and mopping the whole apartment corner to corner, then left for work. By the time I got off work, I completely forgot about the events in the morning because I was exhausted from a long night of work and just wanted to get home and dive into bed and sleep. The whole apartment was dark when I opened the door to enter, indicating that my husband was probably asleep, so I decided to not turn on the lights to distract him. Instead, I turned the flashlight on my phone and guided my way towards the bedroom. I was planning to quickly grab some clothes, shower, and just get into bed. But as I opened the bedroom door, from the small amount of light coming through the window, I could make out the bump on my bed, my sleeping husband. But my eyes were quickly drawn to a silhouette of a woman standing beside him on the bed. The first thing that came to my mind was that he was cheating on me, so I quickly reached out and turned on the bedroom lights. I was ready to pounce on my husband. But right as the light came on, the silhouette figure suddenly disappeared before my eyes. I felt a deep drop in my heart and my body suddenly grew weak. Before I knew it, my knees started shaking uncontrollably. I knew what I was feeling, and it was pure terror. My husband quickly jumped out of bed like he was out of breath and looked up at me like he was surprised to see me. I don't even know if he noticed the fear on my face, but before I could say anything, he jumped out of bed and flew into my arms, shouting, "Oh my God, thank you, honey, for waking me up. I was having the worst nightmare ever. I felt like I couldn't move my body and like I was being sat on." What my husband said terrified me even more, but I decided not to say anything to him or scare him anymore, so I just quickly brushed the fear off and told him to go back to sleep. As I lay there in that bed that night, all I felt and heard was the pounding of horror in my heart. For sure, when those lights came on earlier, I believed that what I saw was a long-haired, pale female woman towering over my husband with her eyes rolled back and a blue, dead tongue hanging loosely at the side of her mouth. When I was 13, I was half asleep in my bedroom, and my mom came bursting through the door. I heard her growl, "Why did you leave?" and opened my eyes to see her standing in my doorway, looking annoyed. I asked her what was she talking about, genuinely confused. After a moment of silence, she suddenly looked very shocked. She asked me if I had left my room at all that night, and I told her that I was asleep, then proceeded to ask why. She looked freaked out. She explained that she had been sitting in the living room on the floor in front of the hallway that led to my room doing paperwork. She was distracted and felt a presence beside her. She looked up to see me standing in the hallway door, my head hanging and staring at the floor blankly. She said that she had asked me if something was wrong, and when I didn't reply, she told me to hang on a moment so she could do something and looked away for a split second. When she looked back up, I was gone. That's when she got up and came into my room, only to find out that I was dead asleep the whole time. I remembered her exact words before she left my room. "Keep your door open. I think we have spirits around." That didn't help me sleep. My family has had lots of weird experiences with the paranormal, but I didn't really believe my mom when she told me this. I figured she had just seen something because it was late and she hadn't had much sleep due to her work that week, or maybe it was a trick of the light, but not what she thought it was. Of course, she kept insisting that she wasn't lying. Then something else happened a few months later that really got to me. My brother is a U.S. Marine stationed in Hawaii, and he got permission to come visit us for a few days that month. He was really excited and took it upon himself to pick all of us up from school the day after he arrived. When he picked me up, I climbed into the car and saw that he looked slightly worried. He asked me if I had been home at all that day. I told him, "No, of course not. I was at school." He explained that while he was at our apartment, he was in the living room trying to clean up some soda that he had spilled on the carpet when he heard footsteps coming from the hall and approaching him. He had originally thought he was home alone in the apartment and was surprised to look up and see me standing in the living room with my head hanging and staring at the floor blankly. My brother greeted me, but he said I didn't respond and instead walked into the bedroom that was beside the couch without a word or even looking up. He told me that he just figured I was in a bad mood and went back to cleaning up the spill. A little while later, he began to wonder how I had gotten home in the middle of the day and came into the room to ask my mom if she had dropped me off and if she was still there, only to find out that the bedroom was completely empty inside. No one was there. I was genuinely concerned when my brother told me this. Our mom hadn't told anyone about her little incident yet but me, so he didn't know about it until I told him. That whole day, my mom and brother did nothing but talk back and forth about their experiences and what it could be and if it was a malevolent force and why it chose to look like me. They even did some research, but the answers were all varied and unreliable. Nothing of that nature has happened since, and to this day, 3 years later, none of us really understood what happened. I really hope I can find some answers, but I'm still pretty creeped out. This happened a couple of months ago. My sister from Minnesota came to visit and stayed in my room. Because my bed was a loft bed and was really high up, my sister didn't want to stay up there with me. The bed was high enough that you can walk under without bending your head, so I decided to fix her an air bed on the ground below me. Since we don't see each other often, we talked until very late at night. After sleeping for a couple of hours, I woke up to this hard shaking on my bed. I immediately thought it was my sister playing a joke on me and looked over my bed rails, and there was my sister, sound asleep below me. I was so confused and thought that I may have been imagining things. I turned back my pillows and slept again. Not even 10 seconds later, my bed started to shake. This time I yelled out my sister's name, and I gave out a long sigh and looked over my bed rails. What I noticed was a dark shadow hovering next to my sister. It was looking straight at me. I was so scared to even scream and was frozen all over. It was like my room just turned into an icy cave. I pulled my blankets over my head and began to pray. There was a long silence when I heard a whisper coming from below. At first, it was very faint, and as I focused on the voice, it began getting louder. My. The thing was saying my Hmong name. I clenched my hands together and tried to ignore it. For some reason, I ended up falling asleep, and by the time I woke up, it was morning. I told my sister what had happened, and she didn't believe me. I told my parents, and they told me that I was probably dreaming. A few weeks later, while browsing Facebook to buy furniture, I saw another post from the lady who sold me her loft bed. Oddly, I decided I was interested in the side table she was selling and emailed her. After emailing her, she asked about how I liked the loft bed and if I had any problems putting it together. I told her it was a comfortable bed and that the setup was very easy. While typing to her, I felt the urge to ask why she wanted to sell the loft bed since it was still in such a good shape. I typed the message to her, and after a few hours, I received an iMessage. Hi Deborah, I'm glad you love the bed. When I bought the bed for my daughter, it was a long while back, and she helped me with the setup, so it was fairly easy. Unfortunately, the loft bed became a hassle because my daughter got sick and she became very weak that she couldn't climb the stairs to get into her bed. I had to set up a bed below the loft so she could sleep under there. And I replied, Oh no, I'm so sorry about asking you such a sensitive question. Is your daughter still receiving treatment? I hope she's better now. Hi, Deborah. My daughter passed away 2 years ago. Just a few months ago, I finally had the courage to sell her loft bed, and with the encouragement of my husband, I'm now slowly selling her bedroom's furniture and donating the funds to the children's hospital. And that was the end of our conversation. I guess her daughter must have been sleeping in the same room with me and became mad when my sister took her spot. When my family and I first moved to Minnesota, an uncle decided to rent out one of his properties to our family so we could settle in. At that time, my uncle just recently purchased a new home for his daughter and his new son-in-law. The couple only lived in that house for a year until they moved out, and my family moved in. That house is located in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. We lived there for about 3 years. Then, my uncle decided to sell it afterwards. During the 3 years there were a lot of weird incidents that occurred, but I'll tell you about the scariest incident that happened to me. My sister and I shared a room, the master bedroom to be exact, and in our room, the vent that connects to the basement was located right underneath us. I could hear anyone who was in the basement clearly through it, so I often closed the vent and would only hear muffled sounds, but I would know that someone was down there. The basement was only halfway furnished, but my brother stayed down there. There were no bedrooms too, just a living space for him to set his mattress and belongings. One day, I came home from work and saw the basement door wide open. I noticed that there were dimmed lights coming from the basement. I assumed my brother was home playing video games downstairs because he liked playing games in the dark and often left the door open. That way he could see the stairs whenever he needed to come upstairs. After I ate, I went to my bedroom to relax. I was touching my phone for about 30 minutes when I heard someone giggling, but it was muffled, kind of like if you push your face on a pillow and laughed. The sound of giggling was coming through the vent that was in my room, so I knew it was coming from the basement. I only heard it once, very faintly, and after a few minutes, I heard it again. I went to close the vent and heard it loud and clear. It was definitely coming from the basement below my room. I thought that maybe my brother was playing video games with his friends or watching a movie. That was probably just him making that sound. It sounded like him. Yet it sounded like a woman too. My brother was also in a relationship and often had his girlfriend come over from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. I was really tired from work, so I decided to take a nap. But because I thought my brother was home with me, I decided to leave my door open just a little in case an emergency happened. This was the first time I ever got sleep paralysis. I felt my blanket slowly being dragged off of me, and I opened my eyes. I was staring at my door, and for some reason, my eyes jolted only to my bedroom door. It was like tunnel vision, and in slow motion, I saw a woman with long, dark hair. She had the biggest grin I had ever seen. The grin was too wide to be normal, and long fingers were slowly opening my door wider and wider. As she was coming in, she was giggling, like how I had heard from the vent. I kept trying to scream and move, but I couldn't. I was breathing very hard, trying to break from whatever this was, because this was my first experience ever, so I didn't know what to do besides trying to move. I still remembered how she looked like. She was very pale and had a long face, long dark hair, and long slender fingers. Her eyes were pitch black, and she had a slightly crooked jaw. Even though she was giggling, her wide grin never moved. It was like I was hearing her giggle in my mind. She slowly levitated to the front of my bed and I felt a pressure on my chest. I started cursing and praying to my grandma to help me. At the same time, my mother came home from the garden. When I heard her open the front door, I was able to break free from whatever that was and quickly jumped up and ran into the living room area. I sat right down on the couch and was sweating all over. My mother asked me what was wrong and why I looked so pale. I was dazed and confused, still thinking about what the hell happened to me and trying to determine whether it was a dream. I looked at the clock and noticed that I had only slept for 40 minutes. I didn't answer her. Still pondering, my mother then proceeded to tell me to take out the ribs in the fridge and put them in the oven for my brother because he would be home getting off of work. That was when I realized that I was home alone the whole time. I went to the kitchen and saw that the basement door was closed and that there were no dim lights turned on downstairs. Eventually, my family and I moved out of the house. I haven't experienced anything like that for a good 3 years. I recently just got married over the summer and my husband and our friends enjoy going camping together. One night while camping, I decided to go into my tent to sleep first since my husband was still up drinking with his buddies. I kept tossing and turning, and with a weird feeling, I swear I heard the same giggles that I heard that day. I have always been an outdoors gal. Ever since I got my firearm safety at the age of 13, I have always been hunting ever since. People used to give me crap all the time because I was different from my sisters and friends, or perhaps it was because I was a lady. Over the years hunting with my dad and brothers, I grew the love for bow hunting. The people who knew me knew that I had a lot of passion for deer hunting. I did the whole 9 yards from scouting, putting trail cameras, and hanging my own stands. I stick out all the time while hunting down south because I'm one of the very few girls that bow hunted. In 2016, I married my longtime boyfriend, who is now my husband. He's also a big bow hunter. While I have hunted with him at several places around Minnesota, in the summer of 2017, my husband wanted to go and try out the famous whitewater WMA. My husband and I always knew that whitewater had a lot of potential for big deer, but we just never tried it due to all the hunting pressure. Our prep from the summer to the fall of 2017 gave us some hope as we captured some nice deer on camera. We did not hunt our spots until the week before the Minnesota gun opener. I remembered the cold, frosty morning when my husband and I arrived at our spot. It was a quiet Monday morning with no other vehicles in sight. The quiet forest was glazed with a layer of frost. We made our trek up the steep hill in the dark, hours before the sunrise. As we got up to the first ridge, my husband and I parted ways to our own spots. I made it to the tree where I was going to climb. This hunt started like any other hunts that I have experienced in the past. As I set myself up climbing the tree stand, I heard footsteps walking towards me. The leaves crunching one at a time, the sound which I thought was a deer walking to me. I froze in my position and turned off my headlights in hopes to see a glimpse at whatever that was walking towards me. As the cold frosted leaves crunched closer and closer, I could see a dark figure slowly taking one step at a time towards me. I was approximately 20 yards off a well-traveled deer trail where the black figure was walking on. I froze still next to the tree I was planning to climb. My eyes were locked onto the figure. At the time, I couldn't tell what it was, as the dark silhouette did not look like a deer. It was the size of a big dog, but it appeared to be walking on 2 feet. I could see the dark figure waddling back and forth with one step at a time closer towards me. As the figure got up to the 20-yard opening of the deer trail, it turned towards me. It started walking through the thick brush between us. The brush was shaking and leaves were crunching as it got closer and closer in these dark woods. My heart started to pound out of my chest and my breathing became harder and harder. I looked down to the ground and my bow was by the tree trunk. At this point, I was panicking. A lot of stuff started to run through my mind. I thought to myself, what if this was the black bear that everyone had been talking about? My bow was not even nocked with an arrow, and on top of that, it was a few feet away as the dark figure was making its way towards me. I didn't know what to do, so I quickly turned on my light to see what it was. As I got the light pointing into the direction of the dark figure, everything just stopped. The leaves crunching quieted, and the dark figure was nowhere to be seen. I shined my lights through the shaking bush, and nothing. The dark figure disappeared into thin air. It was almost like it never happened. A sudden chill filled my body deep into my bones. I started to shake as I stood puzzled. I looked everywhere around the area to find nothing. I knew I saw the dark figure. The dark woods just became extremely quiet. But in the back of my mind, I knew that I had seen something. I stood motionless looking around and, out of nowhere, I felt a thump on my head. My legs crumpled below me as I fell to the ground. I was startled as I was on all fours. I didn't know what hit me as I turned to my right and my light shined on a green apple rolling through the leaves. I got up as quickly as I could and then heard a second thump as if something was being thrown at me. It bounced from the tree to the ground. It was another apple. Before I could gather what was going on, the dark woods came alive as a wind whirled through the hillside. All trees were shaking and the last of leaves pouring from the sky. The quiet woods became louder and colder. I didn't know what to do at this point. I was scared beyond words. All I remember telling myself was to get on the trees and climb as high as I could until daylight breaks. I got on my self-climber, making my way up the tree. I remembered the wind was blowing hard as the tree was rocking back and forth. As I made my way halfway up the tree, I thought I heard a voice, but with the wind howling, I wasn't totally sure. I was scared at the time and didn't want to be sure. I paused for a second in the darkness to hear it again. I listened carefully this time and heard in a low crying tone of someone calling for help. My heart dropped at that point. I was already scared and now this. I stood motionless as the wind swirled around me and then I heard another call for help. That's when it hit me. My husband. I started to cry as I climbed down the tree as fast as I could. My tears were rolling non-stop. I didn't know what I would do if I had lost my husband. As I got down to the ground, I heard footsteps running towards me. I turned to see my husband, his face pale and scared. He got up to me and hugged me tight. We gathered our things and rushed out of the woods. On our way back to camp, my husband told me he was up in his tree when he heard a loud clunk in the distance. He said a few moments later, apples were falling from the trees. We both don't remember seeing apples when scouting the areas. He said that he didn't think anything of it until he heard someone yelling help in Hmong. He said he got down to see where the yelling was coming from. As he got closer to the noise, everything went quiet. He said as he walked away, he heard someone cry help next to him, and this time he knew it was time to leave. That's when he packed his gear and came to me. As we got to the Trout Valley campsite, daylight just started to peek through the clouds. We started to pack our tents and items into the truck, and that's when a distant uncle came and asked why we were leaving. We told him what had happened. We learned from him that there was a tragic accident over a decade ago on the very same ridge that my husband and I hunted. Most Hmong hunters keep away from that ridge due to the paranormal experiences.